If you are headed abroad this year and you want to make sure that you stay safe, this video is going to cover a wide range of travel safety tips that are helpful regardless of where you're going. In case you're new here, hi, I'm Christina from happytowonder.com, and this channel is all about practical travel tips, so be sure to like and subscribe if that sounds like your kind of thing. Now let's start with some safety tips for before your departure. The first tip that I don't think is discussed often enough is to not post on real time on social media when you're traveling. There's a few different reasons for this. First off, when you're posting in real time on social media, what you're basically doing is announcing to the world where you are at any given point. And especially on Instagram, there's a lot of innocent features that people use that they don't really realize can be seen by people outside of their followers. For instance, if you geotag a location in your story, sometimes that story of yours can actually show up in a public story, whether for that city or for that region or even for that particular restaurant or bar that you're at. So that means that anybody that's watching that story can see that you're there. Another example might be that when you're posting in a Facebook group, depending on the privacy settings of that group, it's possible that what you post might actually be seen by a way wider audience than just the group members themselves. Or when you post about your amazing vacation on Facebook, if a friend of yours comments on that, then sometimes, depending on your privacy settings, that post is going to show up in the feeds of people who know your friend but don't necessarily know you. So just generally speaking, it's not a great idea to be posting in real time, just because really innocent things, like even showing the view from your hotel room, for instance, can be used if people wanted to find out exactly which room you're staying in and which hotel you're at. I personally wait until I've left the destination to start posting, which I think is a great rule of thumb. Doesn't mean you don't need to share all these great things from your vacation, just don't do it as it's unfolding. This also helps you kind of stay present in the moment as well. Now, another underrated travel safety tip is to simply time your arrival in your destination for the daytime. So a lot of people don't really think about this when they're booking their flights, that, if you're arriving at night, oftentimes that can feel a lot less safe than if you just arrive in daylight hours. So be sure to keep that in mind when you're booking flights or arrivals, to try to time your visit for daytime hours, just because it usually feels a lot safer that way. The next tip is to familiarize yourself with local scams. So the unfortunate truth is, where there are tourists, there are probably scammers waiting to take advantage of them. So the good news is, though, a lot of travelers have enjoyed these scams in the past or encountered them and have shared them online, so that you can now prepare in advance of your trip and know exactly what to expect. So for any given destination, I would highly recommend Googling scams. So literally just Google destination plus scams and see what comes up, so that you know what to expect and what to avoid. Now, another thing that you should be researching in advance of your trip is the safety of different neighborhoods when you're choosing a hotel. So a lot of people think that, if it's a central location, it's a good location, but that's not necessarily always the case. So I do find it helps to do some research, maybe get some local insight on which neighborhoods are safe to stay in. One really great resource for this is actually Reddit. I found that usually when I type in destination plus neighborhoods to avoid, somebody has asked that question before on Reddit, and sometimes Facebook groups can be good as well for gaining some of that local insight. Another thing to not forget is to research local laws and regulations in the destination that you're visiting. So a lot of the time people assume if they're allowed to do certain things at home, then they're allowed to do those exact same things abroad. But that's not necessarily the case. And again, this completely depends on which destinations that you're going to, but there are a lot of innocent behaviors like feeding pigeons, playing music at the beach, or even using certain swear words that are behaviors that could get you fined or worse abroad. So be sure to Google the different laws of your destination before you go. And if you're traveling with medication, a very similar tip is to look into whether or not your destination accepts your medication or allows it, because actually a lot of different countries have different rules regarding medications that you can bring across the border. So again, always be sure to double check. Now, this one's a given, but it's worth repeating. If you are traveling, make sure you get travel insurance, or better yet, get a travel-friendly credit card that includes insurance as one of its perks. So I'm very lucky to have a credit card that includes travel insurance as one of its perks, and honestly, it makes my life so much easier. If you're looking for a recommendation though, for longer trips, I tend to use World Nomads, and they make it super simple to book policies in a few minutes, so I can definitely recommend them. Now let's go over some tips in regards to avoiding theft. I do have a full video about avoiding pickpockets in Europe if you're interested, but here are some of the basic principles that you should definitely be keeping in mind. Now, the most basic one is to just make sure you do not look like a good target for robbery. So that means not wearing really flashy jewelry or really flashy clothes, because at the end of the day, if you look like you have money to take, that is when you're going to be a much more attractive target. My general rule of thumb is I always just go out with stuff that I wouldn't mind losing. On that note, it's also important to not carry too much cash with you. So depending on your destination, sometimes it is important to have cash, but I still know some people who bring out all their cash at once with them, but make sure you're not doing that, because if somebody takes your wallet and all your cash goes with it, that's a big bummer. So what I'd really recommend is separating your cash and also your cards and making sure that they are located in a few different bags, or a few different places at least, so that if one of those bags gets stolen, you're not completely left out in the dust without any means of getting money. It's also very important when you're traveling to always pay attention to your surroundings. Again, this sounds like common sense, but when you're traveling, there are so many potential distractions, so many cool things to look at. So really the best way to avoid getting robbed or being a victim of petty theft is to just make sure that you are paying attention, because most of the time with these crimes, where it happens is when they get really close to you and you're not paying attention. So just keep your distance, keep an eye on things, and you'll be fine. Honestly though, you don't want to be on high alert all the time, because that's not really fun, and travel should be fun. So my solution that I've found very effective is just ensuring that my most valuable valuables are protected at all times, and then I don't need to worry. So what I mean by that are things like your phone, your cards, and your passport. Those are the essentials that are really tough to replace if they get stolen. So make sure you're always prioritizing keeping those things in particular in a safe place when you travel. A lot of people swear by money belts, which you wear underneath your clothes. I personally never really liked money belts. I don't know, they just don't really fit my travel style. And for me, I like being able to reach my valuables whenever I need them. So actually the solution that I've come up with that I find very effective is usually I just wear a jacket or a vest that has an inside pocket. That way my belongings are easily accessible, so I can grab my phone, take a photo, grab my wallet, pay for something. But I also know it's very safe because it's right up against me and nobody's gonna be able to reach into my inner pocket and grab it. But if you're a money belt person, go for it, I won't judge. Now, another purchase that a lot of people swear by is getting an RFID blocking wallet. So basically the purpose of these is to protect you against RFID scanners that can potentially skim information from your cards when you're out and about. I wouldn't say that this is an absolute must, because based on my research, it seems like this type of crime is quite rare, but that said, it's not impossible. So if you are willing to pay extra for peace of mind, or if you already have one of these wallets, then obviously it wouldn't hurt to bring it with you, but I wouldn't necessarily stress over procuring one if you don't have one that you already use in your day-to-day life, just because the risk of getting your card skimmed abroad isn't necessarily much higher than getting your card skimmed at home. So if you're not already using one in your day-to-day life, you probably wouldn't need it. Finally, make sure you also have an idea of where the consulate or embassy is for your home country, just in case. Now let's move on to some tech-related safety tips. First, be sure to invest in some location trackers to keep track of your valuables. So as an Apple user, I use AirTags, but you can also use Tile for pretty much the exact same thing. And I think that this is just really handy for keeping track of, your most precious possessions, and also having that precious ease of mind when you're traveling as well. In addition to that, I would make sure I am backing things up frequently. Now, most of the time when your stuff gets stolen, of course it sucks, but at the end of the day, most of your things are replaceable. What's not replaceable are your memories and your photos. So at the end of each travel day, I always make sure I back up all my photos that I've taken and all the videos I've taken that day, just because otherwise if your phone gets stolen, if your camera gets stolen, then those memories are gone forever. So make sure you're making frequent backups. Another tip is making sure that you can't put your phone on airplane mode without unlocking it first. So a very sneaky trick a lot of phone thieves use these days is right after they steal your phone, they'll put it on airplane mode. That way it's a lot harder for you to track down. Now, a lot of phones these days, like iPhones, allow you to turn your phone onto airplane mode really easily through something like a control center. And that's obviously very convenient when you're out and about, but if it falls into the wrong hands, then that's when you can run into some trouble. So I always make sure I turn off my control center whenever I'm traveling. So on the iPhone, to turn off control center access, what you do is go to your settings, go to Face ID and passcode, then scroll down to allow access when locked, and toggle off control center. Another important safety tip is to just keep people in the loop in regards to where you are, especially if you're traveling on your own. So I don't mean posting on social media in real time, as we've already covered, that's not something you should be doing, but there are more discreet ways to share your location, like different location apps. With the iPhone, for instance, the built-in Find My app makes it really easy to share your location, but there's also a few other third-party apps that do the same thing. Now, last tip for this section, maybe look into buying a screen protector that actually blocks light in a certain way so that you can't see what's on your phone screen unless you're right in front of it. I've been meaning to buy one of these for ages, ever since I saw one of my friends with one, and it's so genius because with it, people can't actually read your conversations or see what's on your phone screen. And in a travel setting, that could be really good because you don't want people to just look over your shoulder and see where you're navigating to, where your hotel is, or your banking details. So buying one of these could definitely be a good idea. Now, in terms of safety tips when packing, one of the first ones I have is when you are putting luggage tags on your suitcases, make sure you're not actually writing any super personal information on your luggage tags. And I know most of these luggage tags come with slots for putting personal information like your address and your full name, but I actually wouldn't recommend doing that because most of the time people don't need that information to find you. What they really need is a phone number or email, and that's it. So you don't really need to have super personal information like that on a luggage tag because it's very easy for people to see it. And you probably don't want strangers from the airport knowing exactly where you live. If you're particularly worried about this, you can also invest in a luggage tag that has a cover as well. Now, in terms of what to pack, I would make sure you're bringing a very basic first aid kit. So something that includes bandages, maybe blister pads, and some basic pain medication because you never know when you're going to need this stuff when you're traveling. I would also make sure I have copies of important documents like passport, visas, things like that, as well as a doomsday doc that basically has all the important phone numbers and things that you would need in case something goes wrong. So phone numbers for the embassy, for instance, or phone numbers for your credit card company, phone numbers from back home. Basically just imagine if your phone got stolen, if everything got stolen, what information you would need, and throw that in a happy little document. All right, now let's move on to some general food safety tips. First, if you're traveling to a country where you don't speak the language and you have food allergies, I would highly recommend printing out or buying some cards that state your food allergies in the local language because you definitely don't want to take any chances with any potential language barriers. Depending on your destination, you should also pay closer attention to food hygiene than you probably would at home. For instance, if you're traveling somewhere without a steady supply of clean drinking water, some additional steps I would take include avoiding ice in your drink, for instance, or going for fully cooked food. And this is just because with a lot of raw foods like salads and vegetables and things like that, if it's washed in water that's not clean, that's a very easy surprise way for you to get sick. You should also aim to eat at busier places because then there's less chances that the food's been sitting out. And be sure to stick to food with built-in protection, so things like oranges, for instance, or bananas, compared to things that you would eat with the skin on, like apples or grapes. I might also carry a portable water filter, like a life straw. They make really small ones these days that are like this big and really easy to bring around. Above all else though, remember how important it is to be sanitizing your hands before you eat with them. All right, now let's finish off with some miscellaneous safety tips for once you arrive. The first is, whenever possible, make sure you're picking an option that has a paper trail. So what I mean by that is, if you're ordering a taxi, for instance, maybe order it through an app so that you're able to get a receipt for sure, rather than flagging one down on the street. Granted, this isn't always perfect, but when you order through apps and things like that, then you know that there's at least a paper trail and it's much less likely to be a scam. I would also advise, whenever possible, pay with credit cards rather than debit cards, because credit cards have a lot more built-in protection, and so generally you have more recourse if your cards get stolen or if you get scammed. In addition to that, I do find that usually credit cards are more widely accepted compared to local debit cards. Now, when you get to your accommodation, there are a few more extra things to keep in mind. The first is to make sure that you're never saying your hotel room number and your floor out loud. Now, a lot of hotel staff are trained now to never say it out loud, just because you never know who might be listening. So it's definitely a good idea to not be repeating the room number out loud or telling someone on the phone which room you're staying in. Definitely wait until you're in a private area to be talking about that. Now, once you get in the room, it might be smart to do a little walk around and make sure that the room is clear before you settle in. So I admit I'm not the most diligent with this, but a lot of travelers swear by doing a full sweep, so looking in the closets, looking behind the curtains, even under the bed and in the bathrooms before you settle in, so you know that there's no one else in the room. And if I'm on my own, I also make sure that I put the deadbolt on as well. And some travelers even swear by putting something really loud by the door so that if someone comes into the room, then it makes a noise. Okay, I know this sounds like a lot and it makes travel sound like it's so dangerous, but I must stress that in 99% of my hotel experiences, I have felt so safe, but sometimes better safe than sorry, right? So honestly, at the end of the day, it comes down to your own comfort levels and what makes you feel safe. So these are just some tactics that you can use, take them or leave them. Now moving on to the last few tips, if you are taking cash out abroad, remember that not all ATMs are created equal and that you should be a little bit picky with which ATMs you're withdrawing from. So for me personally, I tend to only go to ATMs that are connected to well-lit banks with cameras, just because those ATMs are much less likely to be tampered with than the third-party ones that are just found in random locations. And a lot of the time, these third-party ATMs tend to have higher fees as well, so it's really a win-win to be going directly to clean-looking ATMs at banks. That's not to say that these will be 100% foolproof, but when there's a camera there, it's a lot less likely that they're going to be tampered with, so it's just about maximizing your chances, I guess. And this one is a bit random, but do make sure that if you're wearing noise-canceling headphones, I personally wouldn't wear them at all, but if you do wear them when you're out and about, do make sure that they're not at 100%, because you need to be present when you're traveling, you need to be aware of your surroundings, and the last thing you want to do is get comfortable, get in a groove with the noise canceling headphones like you would at home, and then be put in a situation where you're completely lost or you don't hear traffic. So remember, you should be able to hear what's going on. Now, finally, this is a very important one, but remember to never risk your personal safety for a photo. I know the world is a beautiful place and we want to document it, and getting photos is a very common thing these days, but every year it seems like we hear news stories about people who step too close off the edge of a viewpoint, or they're hiking and they're not watching where they're going, and it results in needless deaths. So just make sure that you are erring on the side of caution, you're paying attention to any safety signs, and you're not getting too close to cliff edges or anything like that, because remember, no photo is worth your life. All right, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this list of travel safety tips. Be sure to drop more in the comments if you have more to add. And of course, be sure to like and subscribe for more practical travel videos just like this one. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys next week.